Okay, so take a look at this. At first glance, it seems like a pretty simple coding assignment, right? But its story, well, it stretches all the way from a university classroom back to a classified Cold War program designed to, believe it or not, weaponize the human mind. So what is really going on here? Let's dig in. So, the mission seems simple enough. Build this app. You've got 4 colored squares, a progress bar, a little counter. But here's the thing. The original purpose of this exact design had nothing to do with a coding class. It was actually part of a classified US government program. On the surface, this really does look like any other student project. The whole point is to get your hands dirty with the basics of web development. You know, JavaScript, CSS, and the Document Object Model, the DOM. It is exactly the kind of thing you'd see in 1,000 coding boot camps. Totally normal, or so it seems. And yeah, the learning objectives are exactly what you'd expect. You gotta handle clicks, control the styling with code, change stuff on the page. I mean, these are the absolute core skills for any front-end developer. Nothing strange here at all. Moving on. And look, it even has a grading rubric. 40% for this, 30 for that. It's all just so perfectly academic, so neatly quantified. The whole thing is really the perfect disguise, which makes the real story behind it absolutely mind-blowing. Which, of course, brings us to the big question. Why on earth is this thing called an ESP trainer? What could JavaScript possibly have to do with extrasensory perception? And this, right here, is where the story takes a sharp turn, out of the world of code and into the shadowy world of consciousness research. All right, we are leaving the classroom behind. We're going to travel back in time. Because this app isn't some new invention for a coding class. Nope, it's a recreation of a real device developed during the height of the Cold War at the prestigious Stanford Research Institute, or SRI. So this whole story kicks off in the 1970s. As the Cold War was raging, the US government was secretly pouring money into studies about the potential of the human mind. The ESP Trainer was a tool that was born from this research at SRI, a time when really powerful people were seriously asking if intuition could give them an edge in business and, intelligence. And you gotta understand, this was not some fringe project. We're talking about serious people here. Folks like Ingo Swann, a pioneer of the government's remote viewing program, and Russell Targ, a respected physicist at SRI. And their work is actually carried on today by researchers like Dean Rodden, who are still investigating these phenomena. So what was this original trainer actually for? Well, it wasn't about trying to prove psychic powers or anything like that. Its mission was way more subtle. It was designed to help people learn to tell the difference between a true intuitive signal and all the other mental chatter. The memories, the guesses, the logical deductions that are constantly crowding our minds. The researchers at SRI even had a name for this mental noise. They called it analytic overlay. The best way to think of it is like static on a radio. You're trying to tune into this really faint, distant signal. That's your intuition. But your own brain keeps interrupting with its own loud broadcasts, shouting about what it thinks the answer should be. This trainer was built to help you find that real, quiet signal in all that noise. And here is the truly wild, just mind-bending part of the whole design. The user picks a square, but the program only decides which square is correct after the user has already made their choice. Just let that sink in for a second. This wasn't a guessing game. It was built specifically to train precognition, the ability to feel a future random event. And if you got it right, an image would appear, reinforcing that feeling of a genuine intuitive hit. Okay, so let's bring this all back to today, to this coding assignment. Because it's not just a history lesson. The source material for the assignment actually says that by building this tool, students are sharpening their own kind of intuition, what it calls developer intuition. You know that gut feeling for where a bug is hiding or the most elegant way to solve a tricky problem? That's what it's talking about. And the assignment itself just leans right into it. It tells the students flat out, hey, this is more than just code. You are building something with a deep, fascinating history, a tool that connects computer science with psychology and even the high-stakes world of national security. So this all leads to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? I mean, it's a fascinating story, a really weird piece of Cold War history, but after all these years of research, is there any actual, rigorous, modern scientific evidence to suggest that the phenomenon this trainer was built for, precognition, is even real? Well, you might want to brace yourself for a statistical bombshell. Because when modern researchers compiled all the data from decades of these kinds of controlled experiments, they found something that is frankly really hard to ignore. And look, we're not talking about one or two strange studies here. The source material points to a massive meta-analysis that's basically a study of other studies. It combines the results from 90 different experiments conducted in 33 separate laboratories spanning 14 countries. This is a huge, global, decades-long scientific effort. And the result of that massive analysis? A statistical certainty of over 6 sigma. Now, that number, 6 sigma, might not mean much to you on its own, but in the world of science, 6 sigma is a very, very big deal. To really wrap your head around just how significant that number is, we need some perspective. Remember when physicists at CERN found the Higgs boson, the so-called God particle, a fundamental piece of our universe? They announced that discovery with a statistical certainty of 5 sigma. That was good enough for a Nobel Prize. The combined data on precognition, it reached 6.33 sigma.
Just let that sink in. Statistically speaking, the evidence for this effect, compiled from labs all over the world, is actually stronger than the evidence that was required to announce one of the most important scientific discoveries of our entire lifetime.
And that brings us right back to where we started, with a simple coding assignment. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If a tool for exploring the very frontiers of human consciousness can be hidden inside a basic lesson on JavaScript, what other extraordinary secrets are hiding out there in plain sight, embedded in the ordinary code that runs our world?